You know what real cold feels like? It's standing in your kitchen while your son and daughter-in-law, the ones you just fed, whisper in the next room about you being senile and ready for placement in my own home. Hi, friends. I'm glad you're here with me today. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And now let's step right into the story. My son Bernard and his wife, Tanisha, dropped off their daughter Imani while they went to handle some important business up in Buckhead. That's what they always called it. Important business. The house smelled of the sweet potato pie I was making for the church luncheon, a warm cinnamon and nutmeg cloud that always made me feel at peace with the world. I was humming along to the gospel station, letting the music settle deep in my bones, the way my late husband Joseph always said it should. In those moments, with the sun slanting just right through my kitchen window here in Collier Heights, I felt okay. More than okay. I felt whole. My granddaughter Imani, with her big, curious eyes and the colorful beads clicking softly at the ends of her braids, put down her crayons. The picture she was drawing was of a big yellow house, this house, with a smiling stick figure in the window. Me. She walked over to where I was rolling out the pie crust, the flour dusting my apron like a soft Georgia snow. She was only 7 years old, but she had an old soul. You could see it in the way she watched things, quiet and steady. She pressed her little body against my side and whispered, her breath warm against my arm. The words she said froze the blood in my veins. "Grandma," she breathed, her voice so small I almost missed it. "I heard Mommy and Daddy talking. They said they're going to put you in Quiet Haven soon and take all of Grandpa Joseph's money." Quiet Haven. The name itself was a lie. We all knew what it was. A place on the south side of town where old folks were sent when their families got tired of them. A place that smelled of bleach and regret. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. All their recent concern, the way Tanisha kept saying, "Melody, you shouldn't be alone in this big house." The way Bernard kept asking about bank statements and insurance papers. It wasn't care. It was a reconnaissance mission. A gentle, smiling invasion before the real one. They were measuring my home for a coffin and my life for a price tag. I looked down at Imani's innocent face, her eyes searching mine for a reaction. I couldn't let her see the world crack open. I forced a smile that felt like breaking glass. I smoothed her braids back from her forehead. "Oh, honey," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. "That must just be some silly grown-up talk. You know how grown-ups are." She seemed to accept it, but the shadow in her eyes told me she knew what she'd heard. She went back to her drawing, but she didn't pick up the crayons. Again, she just sat there looking at the smiling woman in the window of the yellow house. Inside me, a fire was starting to burn. A cold fire. The kind that doesn't make noise but consumes everything. For months since Joseph passed, I'd been letting them treat me like a fragile old thing, a problem to be managed. I let them handle the complicated paperwork. I let them pay my bills from my account. I let their pity feel like love. Bless my heart, I was a fool. I walked over to the old radio on the counter and turned the gospel music up, just a little louder so the house would sound the same, so the air wouldn't feel so heavy. Then I wiped the flour from my hands, walked into the living room, and pulled out the old leather-bound address book Joseph had kept for 50 years. His tidy, strong handwriting filled the pages. I flipped past the numbers for old friends, past the names of cousins long gone. My finger stopped on a name near the back, under V. Dion Vance. A young lawyer from our church, sharp as a tack, the one Pastor Michael had recommended a while back. "He's a fighter, Lottie," the pastor had said. "Got a good heart, but a strong back." At the time, I didn't think I'd ever need a fighter. I thought I was surrounded by family. My hand was steady when I dialed the number. The warmth from the oven felt a million miles away. A crisp, professional voice answered on the second ring. "Vance Law Offices." I took a breath. "This is Melody Jackson," I said, my voice low and clear. "Joseph Jackson's widow. I need Mr. Vance's help, and I need it now. It's about my husband's legacy." There was a brief pause, and I could hear the calm efficiency in his voice when he came on the line. "Mrs. Jackson, Dion Vance here. Pastor Michael speaks highly of you. How can I help?" His voice was calm, but I could hear the steel in it. There was no pity, no condescension, just respect. We agreed to meet the next morning, 10 o'clock, his office in downtown Atlanta. After the call, a strange energy filled me. The grief that had been a heavy blanket since Joseph's funeral was burning away, leaving something hard and clear in its place. I went up to the attic, the air thick with the scent of cedar and thyme. In the back, under an old quilt my mother had made, was the heavy metal lockbox, Joseph's box. I blew a layer of dust off the top and carried it downstairs. Inside was our life, documented in paper and ink, his death certificate, our marriage license from 45 years ago, the paper thin and yellowed, the deed to our house in Collier Heights, paid in full, old life insurance policies from MetLife, bank statements, car titles. Joseph was a meticulous man. He was a builder, and he knew that a strong foundation was everything. I picked up a faded photograph of him standing on the empty plot of land where our house now stood. He was smiling that slow, confident smile of his. I could almost hear his voice, a low rumble like distant thunder. "Lottie," he'd told me 100 times, "never let anyone make you feel small in your own house. This is our ground. We earned it." And we had. We earned it with calloused hands and tired backs, with long years of saving every extra dime. My eyes fell on another picture, tucked inside a bank book. It was Bernard, beaming in his cap and gown at his Morehouse College graduation. My heart gave a painful squeeze. We sacrificed so much for that boy. We poured our dreams into him, gave him the education we never had. How could he stand in this house, built on his father's sweat, and plot to throw his own mother out of it? The thought didn't bring tears anymore. It brought a cold, hard resolve. This was a battle I didn't ask for, but Lord have mercy. It was a battle I was going to finish. I was preparing for a war nobody was supposed to know was happening, especially not the enemy who lived under my roof and ate my bread. When Bernard and Tanisha finally came home that evening, smelling of expensive perfume and restaurant food, I met them with a plate of warm pie and a gentle smile. "Did you have a good day?" I asked, cutting a generous slice for each of them. Tanisha's eyes scanned my face, looking for... What? A crack? A sign of weakness? She found none. They ate their pie and talked about their important business, and I listened, nodding, my mind 1,000 miles away planning my first move. The next morning I put on my good Sunday dress, the navy blue one with the pearl buttons. "I'm off to my quilting circle," I announced cheerfully. "Sister Evelyn is teaching us a new pattern." Tanisha gave me that tight saccharine smile of hers. "That's wonderful, Melody. Don't overdo it." It was a perfect lie, woven from the fabric of their expectations. They saw a harmless old woman going to gossip with her friends over scraps of cloth. They didn't see a general going to meet her council. Instead of turning toward the church, I drove my old, trusty Buick downtown. The skyline of Atlanta rose up to meet me, all glass and steel, a world away from my quiet street. Dion Vance's office was neat and modern, but not flashy. He was younger than I expected, maybe 35 with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He didn't rush me. He poured me a glass of water and just listened. I told him everything. The whisper from Imani, the strange questions about money, the feeling of being managed and pushed aside. I laid it all out, simple and plain. As I spoke, his face grew more and more serious. When I finished, he just nodded slowly, his fingers steepled on his desk. "Mrs. Jackson," he said, and his voice was filled with a cold anger that warmed my heart. "They underestimated you. They saw a grieving widow. They didn't see the woman who helped Mr. Joseph build an empire from scratch. We are going to protect every single cent you and your husband earned. We are going to build a fortress." And that's what we did. For the next 2 hours, we laid the foundation. The first document I signed was a revocation of the power of attorney I'd foolishly given Bernard in the confusing days after the funeral. I watched Dion's paralegal stamp it and put it in an envelope to be sent by certified mail. The sound of the stamp was the most satisfying thing I'd heard in a year. Next, I signed a new durable power of attorney, naming Dion as my agent. This was for the future, a shield in case they ever tried to claim I was incompetent again. If I truly couldn't make my own decisions one day, it would be a man I trusted making them for me, not the son who was trying to discard me. Then came the money. Dion had already prepared the paperwork. I signed the orders to transfer every dollar from our joint savings and checking accounts at Bank of America. They were to be moved immediately into new accounts under my name only at a different institution, SunTrust. We set up a trust, a wall of legal fire they couldn't breach. Finally, we drew up a new will. It was the hardest part. My hand shook as I signed it. In the new will, the house in Collier Heights and a small monthly stipend would go to Bernard, but only upon my death. The bulk of Joseph's assets, the investments, the savings, the nest egg he built for my protection, was placed into a secure trust. The sole beneficiary of that trust upon my passing, my granddaughter, Imani Hale, for her education, for her future. It was the only way I could be sure Tanisha and Bernard would never get their greedy hands on it. I walked out of that high-rise office building feeling like I'd dropped 100 pounds of weight. The air seemed fresher, the sky bluer. I drove straight to the Bank of America branch near my house. I walked up to the counter, slid my withdrawal slips to the teller, and closed every account I shared with my son. The manager came over, his face a mask of polite concern. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Jackson?" he asked. I looked him right in the eye. "Everything," I said, my voice as steady as a rock, "is finally getting back in order." I took the cashier's checks and walked out, leaving the life they had planned for me in pieces on the floor behind the counter. That Sunday, a week after I'd fortified my walls, I cooked. A new and different feeling settled over me as I moved around my kitchen. It wasn't the peaceful hum of before, it was the quiet calm of a soldier before a battle. I made their favorite dinner, my famous fried chicken, crispy and seasoned just right, a big pan of baked macaroni and cheese bubbling with 3 kinds of cheddar, slow-cooked collard greens with smoked turkey, and a skillet of buttery cornbread. It was a meal of love, or at least a meal of what used to be love, a final offering at an altar that was about to be smashed to pieces. They arrived right after church, Bernard looking uncomfortable in his suit, and Tanisha dressed to the nines, a queen surveying a kingdom she believed was already hers. They brought Imani, who ran straight to me for a hug, her innocence a painful reminder of what was at stake. We sat down at the dining room table, the same table where we'd celebrated every birthday, every holiday for the last 40 years. For a while, the only sounds were the clinking of forks and their compliments on the food. Then, just as I knew they would, they started the conversation I had been waiting for. Tanisha dabbed her mouth with a napkin, her movements all practiced elegance. "Melody," she began, her voice dripping with fake honey. "Bernard and I have been doing a lot of thinking. We found this wonderful senior living community. It's more like a resort, really. So many activities and professional care on site." Bernard, my son, picked up his cue, refusing to meet my eyes. He stared at a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. "It's about safety, Mama," he mumbled, pushing his greens around his plate. "And professional care. We worry about you here all alone." I set my fork down on my plate. The small sound echoed in the sudden silence. I looked at Tanisha, then I looked at my son, and I held his gaze until he finally had to look at me. "You mean quiet haven, don't you?" I asked, my voice not loud, but it cut through the air like a razor. They froze. Tanisha's carefully constructed smile faltered. Bernard's face was a mess of shock and guilt. He looked like a little boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Before either of them could gather their wits to lie, the doorbell rang, sharp and commanding. Bernard started to get up. "I'll get it." "No," I said, my voice firm. "You stay right there. I'm expecting someone." Their faces registered a new confusion. I walked to the door and opened it to find Dion Vance standing on my porch, holding a leather briefcase. He was dressed in a sharp, dark suit, and he looked like what he was, an instrument of reckoning. I led him into the dining room. Bernard and Tanisha stared, their mouths slightly open. "Bernard, Tanisha," I said calmly, "this is my attorney, Mr. Dion Vance." Dion didn't smile. He placed his briefcase on the end of the table and opened it with 2 sharp clicks. He laid out a single document. "Mr. and Mrs. Hale," he said, his voice filling the room, "I am here to officially inform you that as of last Monday, Mrs. Jackson has revoked your power of attorney. Furthermore, all of her assets have been moved into a new, secure trust under her sole control. Her last will and testament has also been amended." He paused, letting the words sink in. Tanisha's face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. Bernard just looked defeated. "Melody is moving out this evening," Dion continued, his tone leaving no room for argument. "She has a new residence. As this house is part of her estate, you have 30 days to make arrangements to take over the mortgage payments yourselves or vacate the premises." I turned and walked toward my bedroom to get the bags I had packed that morning, leaving them sitting at my table, in my house, with the remnants of my last supper for them growing cold on their plates. I didn't need to see their faces. I could feel their shock burning into my back. Starting over at 67 is a strange thing. My new apartment in Midtown was clean and bright, with a nice view of the city, but it didn't hold any memories. For the first week, I felt like a ghost, floating through unfamiliar rooms. But slowly, I started to put down roots. I bought a new quilt stand. I filled the kitchen with the smell of baking. I was starting to breathe again. A week after the dinner, a Wednesday, I went to my evening Bible study at the church. It felt good to be surrounded by my friends, to sing the old hymns, to feel a sense of normalcy. I left around 9 o'clock feeling lighter than I had in months. The drive home was quiet. The Atlanta traffic had thinned out, and the lights of the city blurred past my windows. My old Buick, Joseph's last gift to me, purred along the highway. I took the exit ramp off of I-285, the one I'd taken 1,000 times before. As the car curved down the ramp, I eased my foot onto the brake pedal to slow down, and my foot went straight to the floor. It was soft, useless. There was no resistance, no bite, just empty space. Panic, cold and absolute, shot through me. My heart hammered against my ribs like a drum solo. The car was picking up speed down the incline. Headlights from the cross street were coming straight at me. I pumped the useless pedal again and again. Nothing. By the grace of God alone, there was a gap in the traffic. I yanked the steering wheel hard to the right, my tires screaming in protest. The car fishtailed wildly, and for a terrifying second, I thought I was going to spin out into the intersection. Instead, the car shot across the road and bounced over the curb, coming to a jarring stop in the empty parking lot of a small Baptist church. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. The engine was still running. The radio was still playing a soft hymn. I took a deep, shuddering breath and understood. This wasn't a random part failing. Old cars have problems, yes, but brakes don't just disappear. Not like that. This was a snake's move. This was Tanisha. She wasn't content to just put me away. She wanted me gone, erased. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone and dialed Dion. My voice was a shaky whisper. "Dion, it's Melody. Something's happened." He was there in 20 minutes. He didn't wait for a tow truck. He sent his own and told me not to move a muscle until he arrived. He found me still sitting in the driver's seat, the keys still in the ignition. The mechanic's report came back the next day. It was simple. It was clear. The brake line had been cut. Not all the way through, but expertly nicked, so the fluid would leak out slowly, so that by the time I was on a highway coming down a ramp, there would be nothing left. I sat in Dayon's office and stared at the report. The shaking had stopped. In its place was a feeling so cold and hard it felt like a block of ice was forming in my chest. This wasn't a fight for money anymore. This was a fight for my life. It was Bernard who called, not Tanisha. Her name didn't even appear on my phone anymore. Dion had insisted I block her number. When I told my son what happened with the brakes, his reaction was a performance. First came the gasp of shock, then the flood of worried questions. But it didn't take long for the poison to seep through. "Mama," he said, his voice shifting into that condescending, placating tone he'd been using for months. "Are you sure? I mean, that's a very old car. Maybe you just forgot to get it inspected. Let me tell you something. You've been so forgetful lately." It was gaslighting, pure and simple. Trying to make me believe I was the crazy one, trying to turn their attempt on my life into another symptom of my decline. I could practically hear Tanisha in the background coaching him, feeding him the lines. I ended the call without another word. A few days later, their next move arrived via a courier, a thick envelope containing a petition for an emergency conservatorship. I spread the documents out on my new kitchen table, and the words blurred with my rage. They were using the incident with the car against me. The petition claimed I was suffering from advanced paranoia and delusions. It stated that I had fabricated a story about my car being tampered with, proving I was a danger to myself and others. They painted my escape from their control as a psychotic episode. My careful planning with Dion, my transfer of my own money, they twisted it all into evidence of an unstable mind, a sudden and irrational liquidation of assets. They were trying to use the law to do what the faulty brakes couldn't, strip me of my life. Dion was furious. When he saw the petition, a muscle in his jaw clenched. "They have crossed a line they can never uncross, Melody," he said, his voice quiet but lethal. "They are trying to use your near-death experience as proof of your insanity. Now we hit back, hard." We didn't just respond. We launched a counteroffensive. We filed our own motion, accusing them of filing a fraudulent petition in a malicious attempt to cover up their own criminal actions and financial exploitation. We attached the mechanics report. We attached copies of the bank statements showing Tanisha's questionable reimbursements to herself from my account in the months before I cut them off. That same afternoon, I walked into the Atlanta Police Department and filed a formal report about the brake line. I knew it was their word against mine. I knew there were no fingerprints, no witnesses. But I wanted it on the record. I wanted the system to know that Melody Jackson was not paranoid, and she was not going away quietly. The war for my money was over. The battle for my mind had just begun. Their attempt to have me declared insane meant the court appointed an independent medical expert, a Dr. Harris, to evaluate my mental state. The battle for my mind was now a formal procedure, scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon in a sterile office that smelled of rubbing alcohol. I wasn't scared. I was ready. I sat across from a kind-faced woman with sharp, intelligent eyes as she led me through the tests. I drew the face of a clock, my hand perfectly steady as I marked the time at 11:10. I answered questions about my life, about current events, about who the president was. I recalled lists of words. It was all very calm and precise. Then Dr. Harris put her pen down. "Mrs. Jackson," she said gently, "tell me about your husband's passing. Your son's petition states that your grief has caused a significant cognitive decline." I looked at her, not as a patient to a doctor, but as one woman to another. "Doctor," I said, my voice quiet, "my husband was my whole world for 45 years. When I lost him, I lost the ground under my feet. Grief isn't senility. It's a wound. It doesn't make you stupid. It just makes you hurt. My son and his wife mistook my grief for weakness. They saw a broken woman and they thought she'd be easy to push aside. They were wrong." I told her about my life, my community, my faith. I told her that managing a household, a church bake sale, and a quilting circle required a mind as sharp as any CEO's. While I was fighting on the medical front, Dion was fighting on the community front. He asked my friends from the quilting circle and the sisters from my church to write letters to the court. And they did. They wrote about my leadership, my sharp memory for details, my active participation in our lives. They painted a picture not of a confused old woman, but of a beloved matriarch, a pillar of our community. A social worker also made a mandatory, unannounced visit to my new apartment. She found a home that was immaculate, organized, and safe. She noted the neat stacks of books on my nightstand, the labeled containers in my pantry, and the calendar on my fridge with all my appointments clearly marked. Her report described a woman who was highly functional, independent, and living in a well-maintained and secure environment. The day of the hearing arrived. I sat straight and tall in the courtroom, Dion beside me. Tanisha and Bernard sat at the other table, looking confident, whispering to their lawyer. Then the judge began to speak. He read from Dr. Harris's report. His voice echoed in the quiet room. After a thorough evaluation, I find no evidence of cognitive impairment or incapacity. Mrs. Jackson possesses a clear and lucid mind. He looked up, peering over his glasses at my son and his wife. The report concludes, he said, his voice hardening, that this petition appears to be a malicious and predatory attempt to gain control over Mrs. Jackson's substantial assets. He slammed his gavel. Down. Petition for conservatorship is denied with prejudice. The words hit Tanisha and Bernard with the force of a physical blow. They visibly shrank in their seats, their arrogance wiped away, replaced by the stark, ugly truth of their exposure. I had won. I had proven that my mind was my own. The victory in court gave me a moment to breathe, but I knew Tanisha wasn't the type to give up. A snake doesn't stop being a snake just because you've stepped on its tail. I spent the next few weeks settling into a quiet rhythm, enjoying my newfound peace. Then the next attack came, not with a bang, but with a letter. It was a plain white envelope from MetLife, an insurance company. I almost threw it out as junk mail, but something made me open it. The letter was a formal notice, warning me that an old life insurance policy taken out by Joseph was in danger of being canceled. The reason: an unpaid loan for $25,000, taken against the policy's value 6 months ago. I stared at the paper, my blood running cold. 6 months ago. I was drowning in grief 6 months ago. I wasn't taking out loans. I was barely getting out of bed. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I had never taken this loan. My hands were shaking as I called the number on the letterhead. I gave the operator my policy number. She confirmed the details. The loan had been processed via a notarized request form, sent through the U.S. mail. And ma'am, she added, I see here that the primary contact email on your account was changed around that same time. She read the email address aloud, jamal.tanisha.finance@igmail.com. The name hit me like a slap, Tanisha. In the fog of my grief, she had sat at my kitchen table day after day with piles of paperwork. Let me help you with this, Melody, she'd said. It's all so confusing. She had been helping me, all right, helping herself to my future. She had slipped a loan application into a stack of sympathy cards and bank statements. She had forged my name. This wasn't just a lie anymore. This wasn't just family greed. This was mail fraud, a federal crime. I need you to send me copies of everything, I told the operator, my voice trembling with a new kind of fury. Every document related to that loan, especially the request form, the one with my signature and the notary's seal. When the documents arrived from MetLife, I laid them on the table in Dion's office. The signature on the loan form was a masterful forgery. It was close, but it wasn't my hand. It lacked the slight tremor, the unique curve of my M. She's good, Dion said grimly, but she's not perfect, and she got sloppy. The key was the notary stamp. a name and a commission number. It was a lead, but we needed more. That's when I called my dear friend from church, Sister Evelyn. Evelyn wasn't just my friend in the quilting circle. She'd worked as a paralegal in a real estate office for 30 years before retiring. She knew her way around. Public records. "Evelyn," I said, "I need you to look up a notary for me." 20 minutes later, Evelyn called back. "Got her, Melody," she said. "Name is registered to a woman who works at a UPS store out in Sandy Springs." A UPS store, a public place, a place with security cameras. My heart started beating faster. I took a deep breath and made the next call myself. I explained to the notary who I was, that I was investigating a potential fraud. Her voice was hesitant at first, but then I described the date. Her memory sharpened. "Wait a minute," she said. "I think I do remember. An elegant woman, very well dressed. She came in with the paperwork already filled out. Said her mother was too frail to come in person." "What was she wearing?" I asked, holding my breath. "A beautiful blue dress," the notary said. "Like a cobalt blue. Ann Taylor, I think. Very classy." The blue Ann Taylor dress. Tanisha had worn it to Imani's christening. She thought she was so clever using my driver's license, which she'd borrowed to update my records at the bank. She dressed the part of a dutiful daughter, and the notary had believed her completely. Later that day, Sister Evelyn came to my apartment. She looked troubled. "Melody," she said, taking my hands in hers, "there's something else. I've been praying on this, and I think the Lord wants me to tell you." She told me about a conversation she'd had with Joseph just a few weeks before he passed. He'd seemed worried. He told her he had set something aside for me. A nest egg, he called it, that the children didn't need to know about. He said he was worried Bernard was getting too caught up in Tanisha's expensive tastes. Then Evelyn handed me a sealed, yellowed envelope. "He gave me this," she said. "He told me to give it to you only if you ever found yourself in real trouble." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. It was Joseph's handwriting, strong and clear, even at the end. "Lottie," it read, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I want you to remember I left you this MetLife policy so you would never have to depend on anyone. It's your safety net. Don't let Bernard and his wife pressure you. Your life is your own. Live it fully. All my love, Joseph." Tears streamed down my face. It was a voice from the grave, a final act of protection. It was all the proof I needed. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was Joseph's too. And now I had the ammunition I needed to end it. For the final confrontation, I chose the location with care. I made a reservation at Pascal's, the legendary restaurant on Northside Drive. It's more than just a place to eat, it's a piece of our history, a place where men like Dr. King and John Lewis broke bread and planned the future. I needed that strength, that history, in the air around me. I invited Bernard and Tanisha for dinner. I also invited Dion and Sister Evelyn. I told them all it was time to resolve things, once and for all. When Bernard and Tanisha walked in, they looked uneasy. They saw Dion and Evelyn already seated at the table, and their faces tightened. On the white tablecloth in front of my seat was a single thick manila folder. They sat down, the silence at the table heavy and suffocating. I let them stew in it for a minute. Then I opened the folder. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke calmly, as if discussing the weather. One by one, I slid the documents across the table toward Tanisha. "This," I said, pushing the MetLife loan form, "is the request for $25,000 that I supposedly signed." I slid over the notary's written statement. "This is a description of the woman who brought in the form. An elegant woman in a blue Ann Taylor dress." Tanisha's eyes darted toward Bernard, but he wouldn't look at her. He was staring at his empty plate as if it held the answers to the universe. Finally, I placed Joseph's handwritten note on top of the pile. "And this is a letter my husband left for me with Sister Evelyn before he passed away. A letter about the very insurance policy you tried to steal. Tanisha finally found her voice, a shrill, ugly sound in the dignified restaurant. This is ridiculous. You're a lying, confused old woman. You're making all of this up because you're angry we tried to get you help. Dayon raised a hand. Let me tell you something, he said, his voice cold and precise. Before this meeting, we filed a request for the security camera footage from the UPS store in Sandy Springs for that specific date and time. Tanisha scoffed, but a flicker of panic crossed her face. You're bluffing. At that moment, a woman who had been sitting alone at a nearby table stood up and walked toward us. She was dressed in a simple pantsuit and had a calm, no-nonsense air about her. She pulled a badge from her pocket and placed it on the table. I'm Detective Harding, Atlanta PD, she said, her eyes fixed on Tanisha. Mrs. Hale, we have more than enough probable cause to believe you have committed wire fraud, mail fraud, and forgery. I think you'll find we're not bluffing at all. The mask finally shattered. Tanisha's face crumpled, the carefully constructed elegance dissolving into raw, cornered fear. Bernard just sat there, a stone statue, a man broken by his own weakness. The battle was over. The district attorney's office in Fulton County didn't mess around. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the notary's testimony, the email address, the security footage. Faced with the prospect of a federal prison sentence, Tanisha's lawyer quickly arranged a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to a lesser felony charge. There was no trial, just a quiet, humiliating proceeding in a courtroom that felt cold and impersonal. The judge was a woman who did not look impressed by Tanisha's tears. The sentence came down hard and clear: 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a mandatory course in financial ethics, which made even Dayon raise an eyebrow. But the most important part of the sentence was the restitution. Tanisha was ordered to repay the full $25,000 plus interest and to cover all of my legal fees. A restraining order was also put in place. She was forbidden from contacting me or coming within 100 yards of my residence, except for communications regarding Imani, which had to go through our respective lawyers. Bernard, as a co-signer on their mortgage and joint bank accounts, was not criminally charged, but he was held civilly liable for the debt. A lien was placed on their big house in the suburbs, the one they were so proud of. The judgment was absolute. They had tried to steal my security, and now theirs was in ruins. The first thing they sold was the Lexus. I saw it listed online one day, and a week later, it was gone. The monthly repayment check started arriving at Dion's office like clockwork. The very first payment went straight to MetLife, and a letter arrived a short time later confirming that my policy, Joseph's final gift, had been fully restored. Bernard started calling. At first, I didn't answer, but then he started leaving messages. He sounded different, broken. He told me he had started therapy. He said he was sorry, not just for the money, but for everything, for his weakness, for letting Tanisha's ambition poison their lives. Slowly, carefully, I let him back in, a little at a time. He would come to my apartment alone, and we would just sit and talk. There were no easy apologies, no quick forgiveness. I wrote down a list of rules for our new relationship: honesty, respect, no more secrets. He had to earn my trust back, inch by painful inch. My life became my own again. It was fuller and richer than it had been in years. I went back to my quilting circle. I rejoined the church choir, my voice soaring with the hymns. I took a bus tour with Sister Evelyn and a few of the other ladies to see the fall colors in the mountains. I was free. I saw Imani every Sunday. Tanisha would drop her off at the end of the block, and my granddaughter would run into my arms. We baked cookies and worked on quilts together. One afternoon, we made a new sign for my refrigerator, drawing it with bright, colorful markers. We called it Grandma Lottie's House Rules. Rule number 1, written in Imani's careful 7-year-old print, was simple: never take something that doesn't belong to you. It took them just over a year of scrimping and saving, But Bernard finally paid back every last dime, refinancing his home to settle the final amount. The day the last check cleared, I went out onto my little balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I was safe. I was whole. I was the matriarch of my family on my own terms. My house was no longer a place of betrayal, but a fortress built on a new foundation. A foundation of respect I had earned, and a peace I had fought for.